There we go. Backup recording. Yep. Cool. Welcome along. Have you two, have I seen you on a members webinar before? I don't think I have. No? Cool. All right. We usually have more people join, and then there's a bunch of people who just watch the replay and stuff. I try to make it interactive in a kind of structured, controlled way, which is I'll go on a little rant. I'll ask people to bring up questions and comments, and then I'll bring you online to chat through it. So I think you guys are pretty familiar with Zoom. There's the chat box on the side there. If you click the little speech bubble icon, it's different, a little bit different for phones and computers, but you should be able to find it. If you have anything you want to say, you can either type it in there, or you can just say, Dan, I want to talk, or Dan, I have a question, something like that. There is also somehow a way to put your hand up as a function. For the life of me, I've not been able to figure it out, but some other people have. So there's some way to do that. I think I've never been able to see it because I'm the host. I think it's something that only guests can do. But that's another way you can grab my attention as well and catch me up mid-rant. Cool. Well, I'll get started. So today we're talking about freedom. And when I think of freedom, I always think of Braveheart, the movie. I think I've talked about this with Simon before. The bit at the end where he's getting tortured to death, and instead of saying the thing that the king wants him to say, he just screams freedom and like dies screaming that, and that's what I think of. This guy, kind of his integrity right up to the last drop of life, no matter how much pain he's in, he stands for what he believes in. And that imagery is actually going to have a huge impact on my perspective on freedom today. Because physically he is completely captured, he has no options, there's nothing he can do to escape his situation, it's out of his control, and yet he still has a specific choice that he makes in that moment. So we're going to talk about freedom as if you've never really considered it before. It's the reason I chose freedom today is because in so much of my one-to-one coaching, ultimately, all the different strategies that people are using are just a vehicle towards something that they could call freedom. If nice guy syndrome is about pleasing people, it's for social freedom. If you're really needy and greedy around money and wealth accumulation, it's about financial freedom, And even people traveling the world, it's about location freedom. There's this kind of constant desire to get unrestricted that I see in people who are involved in self-development work. And I just caught myself that last bit there because I think a lot of the people I don't see and will never see for coaching are the ones who don't want freedom. They want safety and security. They don't want a huge range of choices. I remember traveling around the United States, and it's such a big, beautiful country to travel around. It's so much better in real life than it is on TV. And yet I'd meet people who had never left their hometown in like 40 years. And all they could drive to a million like beautiful sites. There's Grand Canyons, there's fucking natural parks, there's Vegas, there's all these awesome cities and stuff. And America's got it all. And yet there's people who haven't been outside of like a 20-kilometer radius ever in their life. So I don't see much from them. So when we talk about freedom, I think I'm talking to not all people, just the specific people who feel this constant urge to remove restrictions all the time and feel very frustrated by restrictions. So we're going to look at freedom. We're going to try and define it and make sure you understand what you know, understand that you know what you mean when you say freedom. It's one of the reasons for that is so many people I work with say that they want some form of freedom, but they've never clearly defined it, and therefore they don't actually know what they're trying to get. They don't know what they're chasing, and of course, if you don't know what you're going for, your strategies are going to be all to shit, right? They're just going to be chasing highs and so on. So we're going to look at defining freedom, and then we're going to challenge a definition. We're going to challenge whether or not it's possible to achieve freedom as you've defined it, and whether you're chasing an illusion or something tangible, something that can happen. And we want to make sure that we end this call with a clear understanding of possible freedom, a freedom that is something you can actually bring into your life. So, Chris, welcome along, mate. So we're going to look at making sure that in your pursuit for freedom, you're going for something that is possible, and you're going for it in a way that will actually help. That's the two main problems I see people is they have a definition of freedom that's impossible to achieve or impossible to achieve long term, and they have a strategy that's not going to achieve it anyway, a strategy that tends to make them ever more a prisoner. Chris, it's good to have you here actually, because I think we've spoken about this at length. If I'm a nice guy and my idea of freedom is that everybody likes me, already that's impossible. My method for making everybody like me is to constantly perform all the time, so I'm restricted in how I express myself. So I'm actually trapping myself in a prison to achieve a freedom that can't be achieved. I couldn't be further away from freedom with that way of living. In fact, I'm guaranteeing it can't happen. And this is something that I see a lot of people do. It's the same with financial freedom. I won't go into it too deep right now. I'm just sort of setting the scene. But someone chasing money, how are you free if you have to chase? You're actually now in a prison, or you're kind of like a slave. How are you free to do things if you have to wait for the right amount of money, so to speak? That's not freedom. That's lack of freedom. So quite often, the way we pursue freedom guarantees that we'll be either a prisoner or a slave. We're either forced to stay in a spot we don't want to stay in, either mentally or physically. We're forced to do tasks that we don't want to do, like a slave. So we're going to look at trying to figure out that. We're also going to look at what gets in the way. Once you have a definition of freedom that you can actually achieve, and you have a methodology that might make it happen, we're going to look at what's going to get in the way of that. Because freedom isn't free. It's one of the massive lessons I've learned is like, if you want freedom, it's really like Braveheart. You're going to have to fight to the death for it. And the whole world's going to be against you having it. It's this bizarre thing. And I'm not very spiritual guy in terms of like religious or metaphysical or pseudo-scientific beliefs. But it seems to me that the universe is set up to constantly challenge you, and that the reward isn't accepting that challenge. And in a way, this can be easily explained with science and evolution. Your genes are being put to the test to see if they can handle the environment. You're in competition with all the other genes. You'll survive and pass those genes on if you can accept the challenge and overcome it, if you can evolve, mutate. But sometimes it almost feels spiritual to me, like the universe is like, hey, this is the wall I'm going to keep putting in front of you. And I'm going to do that for the rest of your life, and your meaning of life will come from climbing over that wall again and again and again. Sometimes it feels like that, and sometimes I do feel like going, fuck this, and just going to sleep underneath the wall and giving up, So we'll have a look at what gets in the way of freedom, the many things. We'll look at how to overcome those barriers, and I'll sort of foreshadow it. I believe that the very act of overcoming those barriers is the act of freedom. So we're going to have a look at that, and then we'll finish up with looking at the actions you'll need to take this week to further pursue that concept of freedom. So let's get started with a real general brainstorm. There are no wrong answers, of course, except answers that disagree with me. And I want to have a look at what you guys currently think freedom is. Okay? Your best guess, and you can't get this wrong really, it's a draft. If you had to define freedom as clearly as possible and in as the smallest amount of words you have available to you, what would you say? Now, you can either type it up in the chat box there, or raise your hand if you want to jump on the line and talk it through. I can actually see you guys, so if you want to go like that, I can bring it on. Oh, Simon, he's figured out the hand thing. All right, so I'm just going to unmute you there. Welcome.
Hi there. I think freedom is the...
First thing first. How did you raise your hand like that? I really need to know this.
I because I'm on my phone, I brought up the options on the phone, and if you select more, then there's an option to say raise hand.
Good to know. Okay. Good to know. All right. Carry on, mate. What's your definition of freedom there?
My definition of freedom is all options being on the table.
All options being
So
on.
you can choose. So you're not limited on what you think to be one path. All paths are open to you, and it's up to you to decide what you want to do.
Very good. Okay, kind of unlimited options and paths. You're aware of them. The choice is yours as to which you take. Very good. Cool. I'm just going to bring your hand down. All right, let's try Chris. Bring you on the line. Chris,
Yep.
How's it going, mate?
How's it going, man? Yeah, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and I was, as you know, I was chasing money, and I was chasing stuff and not really pursuing the thing that I should pursue. So my definition of freedom is, I have two definitions. One is a sensation or a feeling of fulfillment, peace within you, and the second one would be more aligned with what Tony Robbins teaches, is doing what you want, where you want to, how you want to, and with whom you want to. Okay, so that's two definitions. One is more aligned with a sensation, a feeling within you of fulfillment, I would say, and the other one is having that freedom of options to do what you want, where you want, with whom you want, in the way you want it. We can discuss this later on.
Very good.
Okay.
All right, I'm just going to mute you again there. Okay, so again, this time we also include the sensation. Freedom is an emotional state. And then we've got actually kind of a similar but differently worded version of what Simon was saying. Options open, and you get to choose the one you want to do. Yeah. Very good. Hans, I'm going to bring you up there. I saw your hand waving at me.
Yeah.
Very good.
I do it. Yeah, so kind of similar to what Chris was saying, that freedom would be to, if I'm in a place, I'm only in that place. I'm not anywhere else in my mind, like I was thinking about this. I was in the park this weekend and the sun was shining and I was just in the park. I wasn't thinking about what I'm going to do afterwards, or I have to do this or that. So being someplace and being there fully, and not half of my mind is wandering off to something I have to do later.
Interesting. It's a very Eckhart Tolle version of freedom, like presence.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, presence. Yeah, exactly.
So being there, and also freedom is a sense of being able to be there and not being to fictional places elsewhere.
Yeah, not like be on your phone all the time, for instance.
Oh, phone's an interesting one. I should put that on my list of barriers, because phone is definitely an attention sucker. Awesome. So a slight range, but actually some pretty similar themes coming through. One of the themes, I'm going to call out right now, I'm going to quite critically challenge every single one of you. Okay. The reason I'm going to challenge you is because every one of those definitions that you gave me requires you to be in control of the situation. And what happens when you're not? What happens when there aren't all options available to you, or someone else has taken those options away? What happens when you don't get to choose who you're with and what you're doing? And what happens when your mind is just too chaotic to be present? How do you achieve freedom then? Because what I want to end up with on this call, and I'm open to where this goes, but I want to end up with a definition of freedom that is always available to you, that nobody else can ever take away, and that no situation can ruin. I want to start by having a look at the most common definition of freedom, which each of you, I think, kind of touched on in a way, which is I get to do what I want when I want. Whenever I ask people about freedom, this is the most common theme coming up, that the options, not only are they available, but the one I want is available and I can take it. That is a concept of freedom. With financial freedom, it manifests along the lines of, I have enough money to do what I want. There is no financial barrier to me doing any desire that comes into my head. With social freedom, it's like I can speak and act in any social situation without restriction, and the people will respond positively to me. Often described as like being an alpha male or something like this. This idea where I'll be the boss in a social situation. I will be the one who dictates the rules. I'll be the one who reaps the rewards. This freedom of I get what I want when I want it. I want you guys to just start by thinking of the limitations that every human has all the time. Gravity. Let's start with the basics. You're stuck to this planet. One of the reasons that we do not colonize other planets at this moment is because despite our best inventions, it's fucking hard to get off the surface of this planet. We are stuck here. It controls how heavy you feel. It controls how high you jump. It's the reason you can't fly. Sounds like a stupid thing, but I want you to just realize, holy shit, at least my option of flying is never available to me. I mean, you can go on a plane or whatever, but you just lifting up like Superman, that's never available to you. It's never going to be, right? Unless some AI shit gets sorted out, right? You are stuck to this planet. So a very basic freedom of movement is already heavily restricted. If you compare our freedom of movement compared to birds and sharks, we're heavily restricted. So the idea that being unlimited is possible is already written off. And that's an obvious one. Time. It doesn't matter how productive you are, there's only a limited amount you can do per second. And you have to sleep. And you have to eat. And you have to shit. And you have to take a shower. Huge chunks of your day are taken away by these needs. So you're never going to have unlimited time. And you're going to die from time eventually as well. Even if you're the healthiest motherfucker, safest person on the planet. Again, with recent developments in AI, that's a question mark too. But the point being is, we talk about being unlimited, and yet we don't really give much credence to the restrictions we have. Gravity and time, we're like, okay, but everyone's got those, we're all on the same playing field. What about culture? What about law? What about economics? What about politics? There's very little you can do about these things, and they heavily restrict your life. There's a reason you can't just walk around naked in public. Try it. See how free you are. You know? There's a reason you can't just walk into a police station and take one of their laptops. Try it. You'll see that you're not completely free. There's a reason why you can't just go into a church during the middle of a service and start shouting. Try it. You'll see what happens. You like to think that you could be free of all these things which aren't even gravity or time. They aren't physics. They're just mental constructs that we all share. And yet you are restricted by them. Trust me, for those of you who know, I've just been through the visa process of becoming like legally allowed to be in Czech. Man, I was not free there. I had a bunch of other people making huge decisions about my life, and there was sweet fuck all I could do about it. I don't even know who they are. I couldn't see them. I was literally not allowed to contact them. I couldn't have found them if I'd tried. It would have taken me like 6 private investigators, and even if I found them, they wouldn't have spoken to me. And yet they were making huge decisions that had a monumental effect on my life. I can't just walk across borders of countries and say, no, this isn't a country, I don't recognize it. That's how you get shot. So the idea that you can be completely unlimited is a complete illusion. You are, in fact, mostly restricted. If you think the most free, sort of in terms of physics, the most free particle would be like an electron or something. I don't know. Some small particle of light that can go through anything and go anywhere it wants. Us compared to that? It's a joke. We're prisoners compared to that. But I really wanted to bring up this culture and economics thing because as fictional and illusory as these restrictions are, they're very real to us. I can be like, you know what, law is just a made-up fiction that people have come up with. It's not real. Then I go break the law. I will end up in prison. The people will turn on me. They'll be stronger than I am. I will not be able to prevent that from happening. So I'm not unlimited. I can't swim to another country. I have to use someone else's plane. And if I want to use that plane, I have to pay them with some fictional money. And I have to have this thing called a passport. And I have to go at the right time. And I have to obey all these laws. I could try to swim to another country, sure. But I'm going to die. Right? You've never been able to do whatever you want without limitation. And you never will be. So if that's your definition of freedom, you're heading towards the edge of a cliff. Eventually, you're going to come face to face with the truth that no, you can't do anything you want anytime you want. The rest of the world wants to be doing anything they want every time they want. Nobody can, nobody's going to win that one. I often think about, there's some secret Illuminati shadow government that runs the whole world. You think that would be the most free people. But no, they've got the responsibility of running the whole world. They probably can't even take a holiday. Nobody is truly free. So I want you guys to just open your mind to that idea that if your definition of freedom means doing whatever you want, whenever you want, you're chasing something that is not possible. And you might think, well, I didn't mean that I could, defy gravity. But you got to ask, what did you mean? Did you mean you could defy culture and law? Did you mean you could defy economic agreements? Did you mean you could defy religious and traditional, what would you call it, concepts that spread throughout the world? Did you believe you could defy your body, that you'll never get sick, never get injured? What did you think you meant, I want to look at redefining freedom where despite all of those restrictions, you can still be free. You don't need to overcome them to be free. That's what I want to figure out today. Okay? I'll stop here before I go into defining what is freedom. What are you guys' thoughts on this? Anybody want to put up their hand, have a yap? Simon, making use of the hand thing. Here we go. Where are you? Unmute.
Yeah, no, I figured out how to use that. I'm going with that all the time now.
You ruined my life with that.
My initial sort of thoughts from what you said comes down to it. Made me think of basically the idea of living by your values, and if you're living in a way that's as close to your values as possible, then surely that increases the amount of freedom that you have, because no one can ultimately, the only place where you have a degree, you do have a degree of control of what goes on in your mind. And actually, if you look towards living by your values and that as much as you can, perhaps there's a freedom to be found in that.
Well, now we're getting somewhere, I believe. Absolutely. Because what you're doing now is you're looking for that area that beats all the definitions of those restrictions. We know if it's something to do with your body, it's not completely free. We know if it's something to do with culture or law or countries or the physical world, it's not completely free. So you've started to travel inside. Where's the bit in me that can't be touched by those things? Which is a good place to hold on a second. My Zoom's just frozen up and freaked out. What I'm going to get you guys to do is just restart your videos. I'll just send you a little request there. And it's just because my computer freaked out. Okay, very good, Simon, thank you. So we're now talking about values. We're definitely going to be getting into that today. Chris or Hans, do you have any thoughts or comments you wanted to throw in there? Chris, let me just bring you open there. Yep. No, did that not work? There you go.
All right, so yeah, it's working. Yeah. So yeah, I agree with what Simon said. Like living free, live by your values is one key aspect of freedom. And the other one that we discussed the other day is that social freedom, for me at least, is the thing that I'm looking after. And I figured out that it's freedom of behavior, to be able to behave like I want to. Okay. And not limiting myself or not letting the environment or these laws or the things that we usually abide by limit me. So it's freedom of behavior, freedom of speech, behaving how I want to according to my core values, I would say.
Very good. Yeah, the freedom of speech is an interesting one. It's a hot topic around the world at the moment. And I've always wondered, why do people get so upset about that? And now I realize I think it's because deep down they understand that's one of the true freedoms they actually have. They get to choose what words come out of their mouth. If someone tries to limit that, there's books like 1984 and stuff like that sort of explore the concept of what if your language isn't free, how does that affect your brain? And there's a lot of very valid scientific neuroscience research and psychology research into the idea that if you can control someone's language, you actually control the way they think. If you change the way they talk, you change the way they think. So if you do not have freedom of speech, you do not have freedom of thought. It actually limits your brain more so than it already was. It goes the other way too. If you learn lots of different languages and you learn to improve the way you speak, the way you think enhances as well. You can literally become more intelligent through working on your language skills. All right. So I want you guys to just, as we keep going, keep revisiting the idea of that unlimited illusion. You've never been unlimited. You never will be. It is not possible. You can be the richest, most powerful guy in the world. You still will not be unlimited. Your options will still be restricted. You could have a lot of options, but you still got the same amount of time to act on them, which automatically reduces them. And of course, there's a lot of people think, the more options I have, the more free I am. Except the research shows clearly the more options you have, the harder it is to make a decision, the less free you are. It's called the problem with choice. There's a great TED talk on that. If you look it up, if you give people a lot of choices, they freeze. You give them fuck all choices, they make decisions like that. I used to remember, this will show my age a little bit, but going into DVD stores. If there's a lot of movies I wanted to watch at that time, I'd be in there for an hour and a half and I'd end up leaving with some piece of shit that I didn't even want to watch because I just panicked. If I go in there and there's only 2 I want to watch, it takes me 5 minutes. Less. And I end up watching something I liked. So the idea that more options equals more freedom has quite simply been proven wrong already. There's a couple of key aspects I want you to think about here when it comes to freedom. Freedom has a lot to do with attention. It has a lot to do with where you are focused. If you're focused on something you can't control, you're not free. If you're focused on something you can control, you're at the maximum level of freedom available to you. What you decide is important is what will control you. If I think money's important, money will control me. If I think sex is important, sex and women will control me. If I think my family is important, my family controls me. If I think my country is important, my government controls me. Where you place importance is where your master will be. So you think about the concept of placing that importance inside you and you become your own master. So you're always going to be a slave. So if you're going to be one, be a slave to yourself. At least then you get to be both the master and the slave. But you make anything outside of yourself and outside of your direct control important, that becomes your master. And I want you guys to think about the times you've done this in your life. If you made a partner important and their mood became your master. If you made You made your family important, and your mum's crazy beliefs around the world completely dictated your career. You know, if you made your friends' approval important and you got wiped out from having to go to all these social events all the time that you didn't even want to go to, just notice the slavery that happens once you make something important. And you get to choose what's important to you. And if you don't make that choice consciously, it will be made subconsciously. You will automatically behave as if something's important to you. Nice guys know this. If they don't think carefully through what they do, other people's approval gets the default mastery position, doesn't it? If you're not watching yourself and not trying to be honest and live by your values, then trying to please people is what will naturally occur instead. It's your default. You become a slave if you don't take mastery. If you don't take control, you will default to slavery. That's the same for every person. If someone isn't thinking consciously about their career, they will become a slave to their boss and to their paycheck and to money and to society's expectations of being a full-time worker and all these things that they can't control and they don't want to be a slave to. But if they stop and go, you know what, fuck it, I don't care if I'm broke, I'm going to have a job I want, suddenly they're free again. The boss can't tell them to do shit. Nobody can control them with money anymore. There's who here has seen the movie The Departed, Leonardo DiCaprio? There's a scene in that movie where, is it Jack Nicholson? Is that the guy in that movie? Well, the guy looks like him. There's two guys like that, and they look the same. Anyway, he's the bad guy. And he was talking about Leonardo DiCaprio's father, who was kind of a badass back in the day. And he says, you know, he never wanted money. You can't do anything with a guy like that. And I thought that was such a key line in the movie. So I was saying, if somebody doesn't want money, you can't do shit with them. You have no control over them. You know, if someone doesn't want approval, you've got no control over them. There's certain things, if someone lets go of the importance of it, if they're willing to lose it, there's nothing you can do to influence them. There's no leverage, you know. That's why I used to find so difficult about working with criminal offenders. They didn't care. Like when there's a guy who's happy to go to jail, you've got no leverage. The fuck are you going to do with a guy like that? But I'll send you to jail. He's like, sweet, well, my friends are there. Awesome. I'm the man in that place. Like, okay, can't use that one, you know? I mean, working corrections was constantly about finding leverage, and it's very hard to find leverage with somebody who doesn't place importance on anything. Especially psychopaths who only place importance on their own pleasure. I had to find a way to remove their pleasure to have any leverage on them. I had to find a way that them not hurting people was more pleasurable for them. Very difficult to do. You know, with other non-psychopathic guys, eventually I could find like being a role model to their kids as leverage, or, you know, taking care of their brain or something as leverage, but it was difficult work. Someone didn't care about anything more than they cared about committing crimes. I couldn't do shit with them. I really couldn't. What we can learn from these people, these criminals, as harmful and fucked up as some of them are, a lot of them are more free than we'll ever be. There are criminals who are doing life sentences who are more free than many of us out in the real world here, because they don't have importance attached to anything they can't control. That's what makes them free. They might have to walk the same piece of concrete every day, but as long as they're okay with that, they're more free than somebody who gets to choose from a range of careers and gets to travel the world. It all depends on what goes on up here. So what I think, you know, both Simon and Chris, and Hans also to some extent in his first definition of freedom, it's somewhere in the decision process that freedom lies. There's a process that your brain goes through to make a decision, and somewhere in that process you have full control consciously. And essentially what I'm trying to get across in this session today is, if you can make that part of the decision-making process the most important thing to you, then you become your own master. The need to keep or win or not lose, that destroys freedom, doesn't it? I'm free socially until I need someone to like me. Then they become my master. I'm free financially until I need $1. Then money becomes my master. You know, I'm free in the sports game to enjoy myself until I need my team to win. Then victory becomes my master. But there's somewhere where I chose to need that. And that's my intervention point. There's somewhere I decided winning the sports game is important. That person's approval is important. That dollar in my bank account's important. I made that choice. Nobody makes that one for me. And if I can get hold of that part of the decision-making process, I have the ultimate leverage of my freedom. That's what we can learn from psychopaths. They are all about that part of the process. They decide how the world works inside their head. You restrict their options, and they just decide how they're going to make the most of it. There's a story I talk about with freedom. You guys may have heard me say it before, but it was my first proper lesson in freedom in my life. And it was from one of the worst prisoners in New Zealand's history. He's a notorious prisoner. He's in the Auckland maximum security prison in the VIP celebrity unit of all the worst guys. And the reason he's in there is not just because he's a prolific offender and because he's very good at suing the Department of Corrections and winning. He's a legal mastermind. But he's also escaped twice from this prison. He's the only person to even escape once. I remember thinking Shawshank Redemption shit, people tunneling through walls and stuff like that. And then I went to the prison. It took me 6 doors opening and closing behind me with me trapped in a room and somebody watching me through a mirror before I was even inside the prison. And by this stage, I'm just like, how the fuck would anyone get out of here if it's that hard to get in? And then all tunneling through the wall shit was put out of my head as I realized they don't get to have posters on the walls, and these walls don't even go to the outside, and they're metal plated on the inside. You can't tunnel through them. All the doors are locked. In this particular unit, there's something like 4 guards for every 1 prisoner. The lights are on all the time, cameras are watching all the time, and all I could think of when I was in there is there's no fucking way anyone's getting out of here. But he did twice. And what I realized in that moment when I was in there just going, holy shit, I am such a victim right now. If the prison decided to play a joke on me and keep me in here, I'm not going to be able to do anything about it. I can't even use a phone. And I was just thinking about how trapped and how impossible it was to get out. And I realized he must not see it that way. He must see it differently. He must go in here and go, how do I get out? Not, I can't get out. I realized that when I was in there, it was for him, because I wanted to just go and see how the fuck he got out. I wanted to figure it out. I didn't want anyone to tell me. I wanted to go in there and see if I could figure out, does he time the guards and steal a uniform and walk out? And I was like, no, you can't do that. They all look at your face every time. You can't do that. And all the ideas I had were just woefully pathetic. You would have never got anywhere with any of them. Right? There's no picking locks or anything. Everything's electronic and controlled by the control room. 400 people are watching you at any given moment. I was like, fuck, man, there's no way to get out of here. But he didn't think that way. He thought, okay, I'm going to keep my eyes open and look for the opportunity. And you know how he got out the first time? He just cut through the fence. I would have never thought of that. He played good boy for 5 years until they finally let him have woodworking and metalworking privileges, a sort of good standing, well-behaved prisoner. So he got access to a fucking little diamond cutter thing. He snuck it under his shirt, and when no one was looking, he just cut through the fence and walked off. Now, such an obvious and non-dramatic way to get out, but for the life of me, I would have never thought of that. I was too trapped in the oh no, I can't get out of here. I can't remember how he got out the second time, but I think he just rushed through an open door at some point. He was just constantly waiting for the opportunity and knew when to take it and knew what would work and what wouldn't. But the point being was there was nothing brilliant, no mastermind thing happening here for him to get out. He was just looking for it. Where am I free? The thing is, there was something about not being invested in or needy about something he couldn't control. He wasn't needy about getting out. He was just aware of opportunities and his ability to control his behavior, his creativity, his risk-taking, all of that he could control, and he was constantly focused on that. This is what I call the realm of control or the realm of influence, the realm of power, you might say. It's the area, it's somewhere inside your brain that you are fully the master of. It's not the subconscious. There's a lot of fucked up shit going on in there that you just can't quite touch. You can work on it in an indirect way through living by your values and stuff like that. But your insecurities, your history being a nice guy, your fucking weird relationship with your parents, whatever, that's already there. Very little you can do about it at this stage. Your reactions, very little you can do about them. But the key point where freedom occurs is what I call your reaction to your reaction. It's the part of the decision-making process where I believe someone is 100% free. The reason I say this is because my initial reaction is subconsciously driven and there's very little I can do about it. For example, if I get upset by somebody else's behavior, the upset happens to me. By the time it's happening, I'm already upset. It just bubbles up, smashes into me. Even if I catch it really quickly, it still happens. There's the rush. Like, you imagine if someone jumps out from behind a wall and gives you a fright. You've got no choice about being frightened, do you? Just frightened. Chemicals pump through your body, a big electric shock in your brain. You don't get to stop and go, wait, should I be frightened right now or what? It just happens to you. But whether or not you scream at them in defiant anger or laugh and go, oh, you fucking got me, that you decide. That's the reaction to the reaction. My initial reaction of disappointment and heartbreak when I first went to apply for my visa and they told me you got to get the fuck out of the country right now, I couldn't control that initial reaction. But how I reacted to it, what behavior I engaged in next, that I could control. I might not be able to control, the heartbreak of getting put in prison. Whether or not I look for a way out or just sit in myself feeling sorry for myself, that I do control. That's where my freedom lies. I might only have 2 options, but I get to choose one of them. That's where my freedom is. This is why I used the Braveheart analogy before. At the end of that movie, he's tied up, he's surrounded by enemies, he's being cut open. And the guy goes, do you want to swear fealty to the king or something? I can't remember. And we'll end your pain. We'll give you a quick death. So he's got a choice between ongoing torture and a quick death. Those are his only 2 options. He really can't do anything about that. There's nothing in the world that will give him more options in that moment. But he gets to choose. Does he sacrifice his integrity and kiss the king's ass for a quick death, or does he bear with torture until the very end to live by his value, which ironically was freedom? And that's what's so symbolic about that moment. He screams freedom. He takes the one of the 2 options that's more painful, but it's his. Nobody else gets to take away his ability to choose. In that moment, he still gets to choose. Now, I know that's a fictional character, but that so often represents where we are. We might have all our options taken away except for 2. React poorly or react by our values. And that's where freedom is never taken away. You will always be free to make one of those 2 choices. What are you guys' thoughts and questions about that so far? Simon, just bring you up there. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Really got me thinking when you were talking, because one thing that I've noticed, one thing I noticed yesterday was basically I'm doing this thing at the moment when I'm trying to basically do an action each day to sort of just experiment and see what happened. And yesterday, I didn't do something that I'd intended, or I did do something that I intended not to do, which is really quite interesting because after that had happened, I was faced with a choice of A, do I feel sorry for myself, or do I or B, do I just get on with my day? And actually, basically make the best of what there is left. And what I chose the option to basically make the day the best I could. And as a result, what was really interesting about it is I was much more able to observe my own development of my own feelings about it, and actually it gave me a much clearer insight into actually how I respond to something than had I just taken the option of everything's ruined now, so I'm just going to sulk.
Very good. That's a great one. You always got that option, eh? This kind of go sit in this corner and have a tantrum about the situation, rather than actually seeing, no matter how fucked up a situation is, there's always options in it. There's always multiple choice. There's always at least two. That's the point. Everything can go to shit, but you still get to choose how you react. Now, you may not get to choose your initial emotional reaction, but you get to choose how you react to that reaction. Do I react to disappointment by throwing my toys and sulking? Or do I react to disappointment by taking a deep breath and trying to do something that makes the most of my shitty options? Very good. Cheers, Simon. Hans, we unmute you there.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, the hardest thing I think is to just remember that you have these options and not just go by default into sulking or whatever it would be. Like, actually remembering that, being aware that you actually do have options. That's the toughest part.
Absolutely. We've been developing a model for Brojo, this pyramid. There's a foundation, kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. A kind of the first thing you work on, the foundation, the second thing you work on, the top is self-confidence. It's like the fancy stuff where you're bold and a leader and looking like a boss. But right at the bottom is self-awareness. Because if you're not aware, nothing else can happen. And one of the biggest barriers you guys will have to freedom, to any form of living by your values, is remembering you can do it. It's this really kind of silly one. But so often the reason that things don't go the way, that they could go, they don't go as well as they could go, as in me living by my values and making the most, is I simply forget. I get lost in the moment. I get lost in the distraction of the problem, of the surprise and the disappointment. I get attached to those emotions so strongly that I forget that I don't have to act this way if I don't want to. This is why I so often recommend both journaling and a morning routine, because you need to prompt yourself. It's kind of like getting in a fight. If I'm not prompt and ready to get into a fight, and someone come and blast me in the face, I'm going to be like stunned. And they'll be able to kick my ass. But if I think a fight's going to happen, I'm ready for it, I'm much more likely to respond in a helpful way. This really applies to values. It's one of the most practical aspects of valued living, is you need to be ready to make valuable decisions. You need to be constantly reminded in some way, hey, how I react to my reaction is where my freedom is. And whenever you're noticing an emotion of pain, you're disappointed, you're upset, you're frustrated, you're confused, you're afraid, remember, you get to choose how you react to that emotion. You don't get to stop it from happening. You don't get to even make it go away faster. But you get to choose how you react to it. Do you react to fear with cowardice or bravery? Do you react to confusion with self-compassion or with self-loathing? You get to choose that. And remembering to choose that is critical. You won't always find the ability to make that choice. There's plenty of times where I was afraid and go, I can choose to be courageous. And then went, nope, not today. That's fine. I'm still free. I'm actually free to pussy out when it's a choice that I'm aware of. I'm allowed to pussy out. Who says that I have to be brave all the time? I'm allowed to give myself a break from being brave sometimes. That's actually a freedom I have. I have the freedom to not live by my values too. But if I feel like it's forced on me, I don't feel free. That comes back to like the sensation Chris was talking about. feeling free. That's what goes away when you think the option wasn't yours, when you think the choice was made without your consent. When an emotion controlled you or another person controlled you, that's when you don't feel free. But you can make the worst decisions in the world and feel free as long as you know you made it. Which is always the case. You're always the one making the decision. It's just you're not always aware that you're the one making the decision. You don't always remember that it's you. You might be all frustrated because, your flight left early and you were there on time actually, and it's totally unfair. You're sitting there going, but, if the flight had just been here, I'd be all right. Instead of going, I'm choosing to be more pissed off right now. I'm choosing to hold on to my frustration right now. Now you can keep being frustrated, but you can be like, fuck it, I'll just decide to have a nice big tantrum. Fuck it, I've earned it. And you'll feel free in that moment. As opposed to, I'm forced to be frustrated because of this flight thing. The company has done this to me. This airport is against me. I had so many moments of feeling lack of freedom during my visa process because I had this irrational feeling that the whole country of Czech Republic was against me, suppressing me, oppressing me. This is why I have such a big problem with feminists, They're so unfree. They think they're oppressed. It's like, no, you're not. Just go do shit. See what happens. You'll be fine. So, men are stopping women from getting into the STEM studies fields. Go study science if you want to. See what happens. You'll be fine. And this is the same for all of us. We choose to feel unfree by simply forgetting that we always have a choice. I'm going to have to do that video restart thing again. God damn it. Hang on a sec. Yeah. See? Zoom. I'm not free here, right? I don't get to control how well Zoom works. But I can control whether or not I keep going with this conversation, despite the little things that Zoom keeps doing to me. That's a choice. I can be frustrated that Zoom's not working. Whether or not I spend 15 minutes bitching out Zoom to you guys, or we just keep talking about freedom, that's a choice. Right? So I want you guys to think of a new definition of freedom for yourselves. It doesn't have to be the same as mine. This whole conversation is me sort of giving you a perspective on freedom that you can use, abuse, or discard as you see fit. It's not an order or an instruction. In fact, if you feel forced to use my definition of freedom, it's not exactly free, is it? It's kind of ironic, right? But one of the things that I've found that makes freedom very easy is there's one thing, and almost no matter what situation I'm in, I can always do, and that is I can choose to be honest. Both in my behavior and what I say, I can choose to do the right thing. And I can choose to scream for freedom while I'm being tortured. I had a moment when I was going to the UK to escape from Czech Republic to, obey the legal restrictions. And I got to the customs in the UK and they asked me why I was there. And I knew I could just say I'm here to visit my cousin. And that would have made the process so much easier. But it's not true. I'm seeing him, but I didn't come here to visit him. And so I told the guy the truth. They made me go sit in the little shame section in front of everybody where you're cordoned off because you're obviously a terrorist or whatever. And everyone's watching you going, what's wrong with that dude? And you just sit there for an hour while everybody else gets served and you missed your flight, you missed your taxi and all that sort of stuff. And then they come and they grill you. They searched my bag with gloves on simply because I was using the UK to get out of my visa issues and all this. That was a real hassle and it sucked, and it would have been probably a lot easier if I had lied in my fantasy illusion anyway. But I didn't have to lie. All that shit, all that restriction they put on me was actually proof of my freedom. I didn't have to lie to them. I didn't have to play a game. Even though it was easier, I still got to choose to be honest. And the whole time I was sitting in that booth, I thought, well, fuck you. I'm taking honesty all the way. I don't care if I end up in prison. This is one of those moments where I get to define, am I going to be a pussy because of some like government dickhead? Or am I going to hold up strong against the power? You know, look at my white guy problems, eh? So simple. And eventually they let me through, but now I'm through, free and clear. There's nothing that's going to accidentally like prove me wrong or contradict me. I don't have to remember any secrets. I don't have to worry if somebody stops me from immigration or the police on my way in or way out. Says, hey, your part of the story doesn't line up with that part of the story. I'm really free now. I'm mentally free. Yeah. So my definition of freedom is fourfold. One is freedom is being honest, no matter what. Freedom is being willing to lose. I don't always have the freedom to choose to win, but I can always choose to lose. Doesn't mean I have to try to lose, but I can choose to allow losing to occur. I can allow failure to happen. I can do something even though I think it's a guaranteed failure. That is freedom. If I have something has to be a success for me to do it, I'm not free. If it's allowed to be a failure, I can do whatever I want. Freedom is no have to, no must. So I don't even have to live by my values. I've got the freedom to be inauthentic. I've got the freedom to be a prisoner. I'm not just choosing integrity. I also am allowed to not choose it. There is no have to in my definition of freedom. In fact, it's merely the absence of it. And fourth, I get to choose where I focus and what I make important to me. If I choose that right, I get to feel free. If I choose it wrong, I'll know about it. I'll feel powerless. I'll feel hopeless. I'll feel needy. Every time I feel those feelings, it means I've chosen to focus on something I'm not free to control. That's what those feelings are there for, to warn me. In fact, if I'm feeling nervous, it's a pre-warning. I'm about to go into a situation where there are a lot of elements I don't control. I'm really at risk of focusing on one of those elements. If I'm nervous about going on stage, I'm really focused. I've got a potential of focusing on trying to make the crowd like me. I've got to watch out for that. It's a warning sign. I've got to refocus on just speaking truthfully and letting them hate me, being willing to lose them, being willing to fail. Freedom to be honest. That nervousness is my precursor. Like, by the way, focus. That's what it's saying. Chris says, what is your definition of social freedom? It's within that one. And social freedom to be honest, means speaking my mind even if other people aren't going to like what I have to say. Freedom in terms of willing to lose means being able to walk out of a social event where everybody hates me. Being able to let that happen. No have to means freedom to show up to a social event and then leave again if I want. I'll start talking to someone and then just walk away if I can't be bothered talking to them anymore. It means I could go up there with the intention of meeting 5 new people and get there and not want to meet 5 new people, and I don't have to. I just go sit by myself at a table. That's the no have to freedom. Hans, you're off now. Awesome, mate. I'll send through the recording. Cheers. And the focus on importance. This is a real simple one for social freedom. You can either focus on making people like you or focus on having a good time for yourself. Your choice of that focus will make a big difference. You can either be like, okay, I'm just going to be mischievous and fuck with people and have some fun, and if everyone hates me, so be it. Or I'm going to be like, I need to leave here with other people liking me. One of those is free, the other one isn't. It's as simple as that. Ironically, in my experience, when you behave with the neediness, you drive away the results. When you're willing to lose the results, they tend to come to you. It's bizarre, but it's just proven itself time and time again in my life. Let's have a look at what gets in the way of this. Actually, before I go on further, your guys' thoughts on your own definitions of freedom. You guys got anything yet? Simon, the hand raiser.
Yeah, I'm loving that hand raise button. What when you were sort of talking through that, what it made me think of? It made me think of the last two lines of the poem Invictus. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. Which I was kind of then thinking about in kind of a two-pronged kind of way. First of all, I am the master of my fate. So it's ultimately you decide, even if it's just two choices, you make that choice of what you want to do. And then I am the captain of my soul. It's then your decision about how you react to it. And the more I think about it, the more I think, well, actually, if you make a conscious choice to choose what you do, and then you understand, then you accept how you feel as a result of that choice, that's freedom. And that can be applied universally to any situation.
Absolutely. It can be described through the 3X model. The curiosity phase is limiting your options down to 2 and choosing one of them. The engage phase is then acting out that decision. And the release phase is allowing the reactions to happen without trying to moderate them. That's the freedom. So I walk into the DVD store, I see 15 different movies I want to watch, and I get it down to 2. And I go, that one, fuck it. Flip a coin, it doesn't matter. Choose that one. Go home and watch the movie. However much I like it or dislike it, I just let that happen. If I don't like it, I turn the movie off and talk to my girlfriend instead. If I do like it, I watch it all the way through to the end. Complete freedom. I can get all that done while one other guy who wants to watch the perfect movie and can't fuck this up is still in the DVD store choosing. Absolutely.
It's interesting. Just I think that can be especially true when it comes to people involved in self-development as well, because I think quite a lot of people I know something personally I found myself, you get so obsessed with making everything perfect and the perfect way to do things. And actually when you stop and you just do something, you often end up with the results that you want.
Yeah, I should have put that one on my list of what prevents freedom, which we'll talk about next. But perfectionism is a total prison. There's no freedom in perfectionism whatsoever. You can't win, really. Even if you do the thing perfect, you get a brief glimpse before you have to do the next thing perfect. Endless slavery. Very good, man. Freedom to get it wrong is a huge one. Chris, you had something you wanted to add as well? Did I?
Yeah. I was just you to address the last topic that Simon raised, the becoming free from the self-development traps, which we discussed a month ago or so in one of our coaching sessions. So I just wanted to recap on what you said about social freedom, which is speaking your mind and being willing to lose and avoiding the have-tos or the must-dos. So are you basically saying that it's about not being the nice guy, the agreeable nice guy? It's about not being politically correct. It's about challenging social conditioning and challenging those social assumptions and rules that govern us. Be willing to be judged or confronted by those that stick to those rules and that social conditioning.
Yeah, it's one of those ones that it's easy to talk about kind of theoretically, and then you get to a party or something, and you're like, wait, what do I do again? Yeah. One of the things I think about, I do a similar thing for helping people figure out their careers. Like, what would you do if you're going to get paid the same no matter what the activity was? There's another way of applying that, which is socially, is how would you express yourself if people were going to like you the same amount no matter what you said? Like, whether you perform highly or you're just tired and don't say a word, they like you the same amount. What would you choose to do? If the full range is available to you and you don't have to, their reaction won't be affected no matter what you choose. This is a way of just kind of, when you're in the situation, of just opening up your mind to what do I really want to say and do? Because there's a key one with guys, especially in self-development, is social events become this really high-pressure chore. You got all these goals you have to achieve. Now, in one sense, there's nothing wrong with having these goals because it can give you some direction to make the most of that situation, to develop yourself and move through different fears. But the downside is it can make socializing really unenjoyable. It becomes work, and if you've got an actual job as well, it just feels like you're working all the time. What I found is that it's really important to have this there's always this a parachute, this escape route. No matter what goals I have, I'm allowed to push a button and go, not tonight, fuck it. Do whatever I want instead. That's the no have to part. I might go somewhere like, hey, I'm going to meet 5 new people. Now, if that's enjoyable for me, I will follow through on it. But as soon as it stops being enjoyable for me, I push the abort button. Because I have the freedom to take that pressure off myself. The funny thing is, like, most people will actually socialize quite naturally and ultimately quite successfully when all the pressure is off. You can see a lot of people like, oh my God, I'm so useless at talking. And yet they're talking to me as they say it. I'm like, well, you seem to be doing just fine. What you're useless at is performing under high pressure. Well, welcome to the world, because everyone's fucking useless at that pretty much. Take the pressure off and socializing becomes a lot easier. One of the key elements when I broke down the 3X model, I looked at the engage phase, the action part. There's 3 parts. The first part is showing up. It's whatever action needs to take to put yourself in the situation to take the main action. It's arriving on the scene. It's being there, available. The second part is initiating. It's getting the action started. And the last and final part is continuing with the action for as long as you want to. So essentially, once you've initiated, all pressure is now off. You do not have to make this go any further. You've already done the whole thing. So for example, if I'm like going to a party to practice my social skills, for example, then following the 3X model, I simply have to show up to a party and 1/3 of my work is done already. In fact, I've done so much more than not showing up to the party that I'm now officially off the hook. If usually I wouldn't come to the party, then this is a massive breakthrough for me just to show up. And no further work is required. I can go sit on a couch and just watch everyone if I want to, or I can just turn around and leave if I want to as well. Knowing that actually makes me more likely to stay around. If I feel like I have to be here for an hour and talk to 20 people, I'm going to panic and run away. But if I don't have to be there for any amount of time and I don't have to talk to anyone, then I can chill. There's nowhere to be. It's like at the end of the workday and you're waiting for your bus. There's nothing to do. Initiating might be, okay, I'm just going to look one person in the eyes, smile, and say hi. That's it. Now, I'm allowed to continue with that conversation for as long as I feel like, but I don't have to go beyond that initiation. If they sort of look at me weird and turn around, I don't have to try and engage them in further conversation. And even if they want to talk, if I feel like all of a sudden I don't want to, I can just be like, oh, I got to go. Knowing that I have that permission keeps me free. And being free actually enables me to socialize a lot better. But if I try to be free so I can socialize better, I go back to not being free again. I have to be allowed to quit, to bail, to not participate beyond the minimum required to engage in the 3X model. And the minimum required is showing up. I've done this a few times, when I was working on meeting strangers on the street. Showing up meant driving about half an hour into the city and parking my car and walking down to this main road. That was the showing up part. That in itself was quite a big fucking mission. Parking stresses me out. It's like the number one thing that annoys me more than anything in the world. Even when I'm driving to somewhere knowing I'm going to have to park, I get filled with anxiety. I don't know why. I fucking hate it. So getting there, and then I had to walk quite a distance from there. So it's like a 45-minute trip, which feels like a week because it includes parking. So by the time I show up on the road where I'm going to walk around, I officially just would stop and go, I don't have to do any more than this. I just be like, I'll just go for a walk now. It's a nice sunny day. I'll catch some rays. If I happen to find the balls to go up and say hi to someone, I'll do that. I'll keep an eye out for opportunities, but my job is done. It was hard enough getting here. I'm not going to compile pressure on top of that. It's important to know where their line is before you go engaging in any sort of socializing. When are you going to be off the hook? And how reasonable is that? Are you free? You get to decide where that line is. And if that line's regularly in a place that you can't cross it, you can't get there, and you feel like a failure and stuff all the time, then you've set the line too far beyond yourself. That's not freedom. You're being cruel to yourself. If it's hard just showing up, then that's where the line is. If showing up's easy and initiating with more than one person is hard, then one person is the line. And after that, do whatever the fuck you want. You're off the clock. Your workday is done. Enjoy yourself. Observe. Do what you feel like doing. Whatever. Slowly that line will be pushed until nothing feels like pressure anymore. But if you spend the whole party feeling under pressure to perform, parties are going to become a place of just pain for you. You're not going to want to go to them. You know, you won't want to go to the dance class if you have to be an awesome dancer the whole time and ask 10 girls per minute to dance. If you just have to show up and have one dance and then chill, your brain's not going to have a fucking panic attack reaction to the thought of going dancing, you know. So let's dive a little bit more into what prevents freedom. There's some obvious ones, which we've already spoken about. Trying to control your emotions, putting too much pressure on yourself. The biggest one's got to be attachment to outcomes. If you're not free to lose, then you're not free. And freedom to lose only comes internally. It's a permission you give yourself. We're trained from a very early age to not give ourselves this permission. You've got to try to win. Only losers quit. Blah, blah, blah. The only thing that this does is give us a pressure and a prison. Even the winners don't feel free because they had to win. You know, I was talking about this on my Honesty Effect program this week. My dance partner and I, when we first got into competitive dancing, we did really well. Well, we were sort of big fish in small ponds in the competition, so it was a walkover. But we were winning a lot at the start. And it got to the point where even winning wouldn't be good enough. I was fine with it because I'm the self-development guru, right? But my dance partner was really struggling. And like we had one performance in particular, I remember, where we performed magnificently, got stellar scores from the judges. It was, long story short, we would have won, but it wasn't officially a competition because of some technical thing that happened. But my partner's shoe came undone about halfway through, and it was hard for her to perform with it. It's quite a dangerous thing with a shoe coming undone. Now, in my perspective, the fact that she performed well and got the thing finished with the shoe undone is even more of an accomplishment. But for her, that was a failure because it wasn't perfect. And she, I'm not exaggerating, spent 6 hours in the toilets crying because of that. That's not freedom. Right? Her weekend was ruined by a shoe. A completely uncontrollable thing. Right? So even winning isn't free. And you can ask a lot of top athletes and performers, like the dance scene's great. There's so many times where I'm backstage at a performance or a competition, and the winners come off stage clearly having done something that I can't even imagine is possible with dancing, and one of them's crying because they fucked up some tiny bit that nobody even saw. I'm like, that's not freedom. Jesus Christ, do you even enjoy dancing? Like, what the fuck? I watch like these beginners who are like goofing around and they fuck up every second step and they're laughing their heads off. I'm like, that's freedom. They suck at dancing compared to you guys, and yet they get to enjoy it more, and they're unrestricted. They don't have to perform. They don't have to look good. I'd rather be them. I'd much rather be them. So attachment to outcomes is a real fallacy. The idea that winning will feel free. If you look for evidence, you'll see that being disproven time and time again. Winning does not make you feel free. Trying to win with freedom to lose is a very enjoyable experience. So when I say giving yourself freedom to lose, I don't mean just giving up. I mean going hard but being allowed to suck. I've been trying to do 10 pull-ups for like 6 months now. I got to almost 9 the other day. I want to call it 9, but my nose didn't get over the bar and I know it. But I've had, that means for however many months I've been doing this, I've failed every time to do 10. But because of that, yeah, those wide grip ones, I don't know how people do it. But when I started, I could do 3.5-ish. And they weren't like full extension down ones. There was a lot of cheating going on in that 3.5. And now I'm up to 9 fairly good form ones. That constant loss process has been ultimately rewarding, not because I'm always doing better. Sometimes I do less than the time before, but because it's always fucking hard to do and I choose to do it anyway. And sometimes it's embarrassing to do. There's this fucking guy who comes to the gym and he warms up with like 20. And he does all that stupid calisthenics thing where you pretend you're walking on stairs and you're moving side to side and all this stuff that just makes me look like an absolute weakling, you know. I have the freedom to then follow his act, you know, to then go and do my struggle, sweating, grunting 7 after he's like played around with them like they're nothing. It's fucking looks like he's got snakes under his skin. There's so much muscle, you know. I have the freedom to go and be the loser that followed that guy. But the one, maybe 2 times where I decided to skip pull-ups that day because people were watching or I didn't think I'd be strong or whatever, that wasn't freedom. That was slavery. And I know now I'd rather be embarrassed than go home going, fuck, I should have done the pull-ups. Okay? So attachment to outcomes, being able to fail and being allowed to fail, and actually getting to a point where you realize that if you haven't gone to failure, it was too easy for you. You know, if you're winning all the competitions, it means the competition is not stiff enough for you. You should be in the next level up. You realize that and you start to see failure as actually a measurement of success. Then you really become free, because then you're wanting to fail all the time. Fear. A lot of people think fear prevents freedom. But it's the avoidance of more fear that really prevents freedom. It's the reaction to the reaction. The reaction is fear. The choice to avoid feeling more fear is the reaction to fear. So when I'm walking up to someone on the street to say hi to them and I start having my little anxiety attack, it's me trying to stop that anxiety attack from continuing that really prevents me from being free. When I go, fuck it, I guess I'm going to be anxious then, and keep walking, then I'm free. Anxiety never stopped me. The choice to not experience more anxiety is what stops me. The choice to try and reduce the anxiety stops me. And this is a critical element of freedom. We keep waiting for the anxiety to go away before we can do something. The importance is on the anxiety. Anxiety becomes your master. Your anxiety gets to choose whether or not you do stuff. But if you get to the point like, actually, I can do anything in any emotional state, as long as I'm conscious, as long as it doesn't make me pass out, then no emotional state can stop you doing anything. You realize you just have to choose to experience more of it. You can continue the confrontation if you choose to experience more confusion and slight embarrassment. You can continue with the date if you can and choose to experience more nervousness and self-doubt and not good enough story. You can always choose to have more of that uncomfortable feeling and you'll be free. If you choose to have less of it, your options are taken away by yourself. Another huge barrier to freedom is what's commonly known as sunk cost fallacy. investment. I must keep doing this thing because I've been doing this thing for a while. I must stay at this job because I've put in 5 years hard work. I must stay in this relationship because it's been a really tough 6 months and we've been battling through it. You know, I must live in this town because this is where all my friends are. This idea that because you've been doing something for a long time and you put a lot of investment and effort into it, you must continue with it, despite clear evidence that it's no longer good for you, or that there's a better option available. Investment's a funny thing because you can't show me it anywhere. It's in the past, and the past is a fiction. So all that time and effort and energy you put into something, you can't prove that to me. You can't show me it on a plate. Like, here's a big chunk of my energy that I've been storing up. Here's 15 units of time that I've kept saved in this place. You can't show me that. It's all in your head. If I was to give you sudden amnesia, you wouldn't go back to that job the next day. There is no real investment in it. It's just memories. You would be amazed at how much you keep doing that's wrong for you simply because you've been doing it. Simon and I were talking about this the other day. I even went through a brief period of time where I experimented with wiping my ass a different way. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't wrongfully invested in an incorrect method. Turns out I was invested in the only correct method. Every other way does not work, trust me. But the point being, I wanted to just really challenge myself. Like, am I just doing something because I've always done it that way? I remember this because I once went on a camping trip with some friends, and we all had to shower together. And I noticed the way my friend was soaping up his body, and I was like, fuck, he gets himself well covered with soap. I've never done it that much before. I'm probably not as clean as he is. And I realized I've been showering wrong. It was a weird thing to realize, that there was a better way to shower than I'd been doing my entire life. You know? Caused me to stare at my friend a little longer than I probably should have, but the point being is you're constantly invested in doing things the same way because your brain really struggles with change. And you'd be amazed at how often it keeps you doing something familiar but shit just because it's familiar. You know? And the last kind of thing I had down on my list of what prevents freedom. Oh, I should actually say on that previous point, obligation investment. So they're my family, so I have to. This is my country, so I must. That kind of thinking, where you're somehow obliged to some sort of loyalty that's totally made up inside your head. You're not loyal to anything. You don't have to be. You don't get to choose your family or your country or the laws or the ethics of the world. So you're not actually legally or any other way obliged to follow them. Never forget that. But the last barrier I put in here was tricks. Tricks is when you think slavery is freedom. Financial independence is a great one. You know, I think if I just get just enough money, I'll be free. And it traps you into a constant chase of money. It looks like freedom, but it's not. You see this with any entrepreneur. They're like, I'm going to leave my 9-to-5 job so that I can work 100 hours a week. How's that freedom? You know? I got there when I left my job to become a coach. I'm like, fuck yeah, I'm going to get up at 10 every day, do whatever the fuck I want. Within a month, I was doing 90-hour weeks. I was like, fucking hell, I was working 25 hours a week using Tim Ferriss methods at my old job. How is this more free? Now, it was more free because I got to choose how I spent those hours. And once I later realized that I chose to work 90 and could choose to work 10, I saw my real freedom. But the point being is chasing money didn't make me more free. Prioritizing how I spent my time in a valuable way did make me more free. And removing barriers to how I spend my time did make me more free. But yeah, there's a lot of thinking slavery is freedom. Relationship. I'm not going to call a relationship slavery. But the idea that somehow being in a relationship makes you more free That's an illusion. I'd say it's about 50-50. I've done quite an in-depth analysis because I was such commitment phobic before I hooked up with my current girlfriend. I had to be like really sure that I wasn't losing freedom and getting into a relationship. And when I did my full calculations, I realized it's about even. The things you have to give up being single are balanced by the extra things you get in a relationship. But you do have to give up things. I don't get to do whatever I want all the time. The relationship will not survive me doing that. I have to consider her in the decisions I make. I have to check in with her. We have collaboration discussions. I don't just get to call the shots. I wouldn't want to be that guy anyway. It's called abusive. We have to be 50-50 on stuff. I have to share money with her. God, that was a hard one for me to figure through. We still have some uncomfortable conversations about it. I get to let her influence what I eat and when I eat. There's all sorts of little freedoms that go up to be in a relationship. But discussions with her have opened my emotional range. I'm able to feel more than I ever felt before. She comes up with ideas and motivates me to do things that I never would have come to on my own. Traveling and things like that, social opportunities. She's opened up a range in certain areas. She's closed down a range in other areas. It's about even. But the idea that there's some form of socializing that is more free than the other is all in your head. And trying to chase it will make you a slave. Working with whatever you've got will make you free. So making being single work for you or making being in a relationship work for you, that's where freedom occurs. Being single or being in a relationship doesn't make a difference. If you're single and you think, I've got to stay single to be free, then you're actually trapped. That means any form of commitment you have to run away from. That limits your options. And if you're in a relationship and say, I can't be single, because then I can't have as much sex as I want or some other form of lack of freedom, then you trap yourself in a relationship, which I see a lot of people do. I have to stay here for the kids or whatever. As soon as you have to, you don't even know what you want anymore. So let's finish up with a discussion on how we overcome those barriers. What are you guys' initial thoughts when you hear those things that get in the way of being free? What do we need to do to see them and overcome them? Simon.
I think for me it kind of comes back to the whole idea of sort of the last two phases of the 3X model, sort of taking action and reflecting on it, and just to do something, because otherwise, if you get into the mindset of feeling trapped by it, you're just going to stay there and you're not going to do anything. So it's just to do something and then just reflect on it and then decide whether you want to continue that path or try something new.
Yeah, that's quite a practical step. You know, one of the barriers we didn't really talk about is, it comes under the category of fear, is when you overwhelm yourself with the size of a task, where you look at a range of, linear decisions as one big thing. Like going up to a stranger and talking to them and getting a phone number and meeting them later and seeing that as all one thing. Rather than like, I'll walk towards them, then I'll stop and reassess. Which is only the action you have to take. And I think a lot of freedom comes from knowing that there's only this tiny thing you have to do next, and then you get to stop and check in again. There's a lot of freedom in that because you can just keep changing course every time an obstacle comes up. Whereas if you're like, I must get to point Z from point A, no matter what happens, it's fucking overwhelming because you know that B, C, D are all new things that are going to happen, new variables will enter the picture. So I really like that idea, and that's what really helped me socially as well. Is like I'm allowed to stop and check in after every tiny action. I do not have to follow any process all the way through from 1 to 10. I just have to do one, and that's the only one I ever have to do. Then the next one's actually a new one. There is no 10. It's binary, on, off, on, off, on, off. Great one. Awesome stuff, man. Chris, did you have anything you wanted to add as well? Yep. Let me just unmute you there. Go ahead, mate.
Just share two things. So I learned today what you talked about, the third barrier. I think you mentioned it. It was the choice to try not to experience anxiety or fear. It's what's stopping us. And that's where I freeze sometimes. So I choose to avoid anxiety or fear, and I consciously do that as a second reaction instead of taking control of the emotional, being more conscious about the second emotional reaction. And the other thing that you mentioned is, I became aware of recently was that when we had that discussion a few weeks ago on self-development and trying to become an entrepreneur to become financially free, I actually became a slave to entrepreneurship and work and lost most of my freedom in working, So from that point on, I asked myself this question: do I own this thing, or this thing owns me? Who's the master? And since then, I've begun to live a much more balanced life. Yep.
Good. I like that question. Who owns this thing? Because when you realize it's you every time and what it is that you own, then freedom's an option. When you get the answer to that question wrong, when you think you own something that you don't, you lose all freedom. You don't get to own how well your business is going, but you get to own how much work you do that day. You don't get to own whether or not people like you, but you get to own whether or not you show up to the party and be honest. So you keep coming back to, you don't even really get to own the initial nervous reaction, but you get to own the courage or cowardice that happens after that. Do I go into it more, or do I back away? That's your ownership there. What I looked at here, some actions you can take, and we'll just finish up with this now. Very simple ways in the sort of 3 areas of life that they can help you be more free, that I just came up with. In the social world, being honest. It's almost impossible to lose your freedom if your focus is to be honest. It will make you willing to lose, because you will lose people in doing so. Being honest goes beyond having to speak your mind as well. Sometimes being honest is not talking because you don't want to. Being honest is accurately representing what's going on inside you with words or behavior. Understand, if you go to a social event, it's like the point is to express myself honestly, which means, if you're feeling antisocial, you don't put on a big smile and go, hey, how was your day? It means you sit in the corner and you just watch people. That's what someone feeling antisocial can do. And it means if you like someone, you say, I like you. You don't say, oh, so what do you do for a job? And show your interest indirectly. Just be honest. Financially, one way that you can help with this in a practical sense is learning how to survive without a job. You can do this as a kind of side experiment. For example, you might keep your job, but don't allow yourself to spend any money for like a week. See if you can make that work. Asking people for favors, stealing food, no. Trying to put yourself through a kind of challenge that you set for yourself to see could I live without money or very, very minimal money? Cut your allowed expenditure down to 10% of what you usually spend and see if you can live for a whole week. Turn off your power. See if you can go for a week without it, or a few days even. Just a little thing to show your mind, hey, I'm not going to die. I'm actually free to choose to go off the grid. It might be uncomfortable. I might yearn for those luxuries to come back, but I won't die. One of the things that being with my girlfriend has definitely given me more freedom. She's from the Czech Republic, and their mentality around money is you fucking squeeze every penny like your life depends on it. They're post-communist, hardcore. They had World War II people going back and forth across their country for half their lives. So she gets deals that I didn't even know existed. We travel on about a third of the budget that I used to travel on alone. We do together. right? It's a ridiculous. She finds flights for like half the price I'd pay. She finds accommodation for about a third. And then she does things that I would have never thought of, like buying food at the supermarket and cooking there while we're traveling. It's a little bit of extra hassle and something I never did traveling, but oh my God, we save a lot of money with very little extra discomfort, because you don't need those luxuries. And most tourists are suckers. You know, there's things that I realized I spent so much money on Subway sandwiches. It was ridiculous. And I just cut them out and suddenly I had like hundreds of extra dollars every month. You know, it's amazing what you can do if you don't, you know, if you sort of try to imagine that you have to live on a minimal amount of money and try and make it work. Just to show yourself you can. Health. One of the tricks I use for health, this is where the lines blur around freedom, is it can be really hard to resist the urge to like eat sugary foods and shit like that. So what you do is you make it almost impossible. You remove all sugar from your house and make it that you're allowed to eat as much sugar as you want, but you have to walk all the way to the shop and buy one single unit and then walk all the way home. You can do that as many times a day as you want, but you have to go through that much effort to eat sugar. You can set yourself up with these kind of restrictions. It's amazing how many restrictions can make you feel more free, because your freedom is really being healthy. That's what you really want. So every time you eat sugar, you're not being free. You're just a slave to instant gratification. It just feels like freedom of choice. So one of the things I do with health is I make it like impossible to not be healthy. As much as I possibly can, I make it really hard to eat bad food. I hold myself to account. I tell everyone I'm going to the gym and when I should be going and stuff. So it becomes really hard to bail out on it. So on and so forth. I do physical activities that I really love or that make me feel proud of myself. So I'm so much more likely to do them. I try to make it as hard as possible to be unhealthy. That's a form of freedom. And one of the biggest ones is focus. Blocking apps like Facebook, giving yourself limited time on the internet, turning off the Wi-Fi or using apps to block it. I haven't had the sound on my phone for like years. I don't answer calls until I'm ready. You know, it's actually easier now that I'm here because nobody calls me, but when I was in New Zealand, I just didn't answer my phone. I don't respond to text messages. I have a point of time during the day that I respond to Facebook messages. The rest of the time I just leave them. All these things where I'm not constantly breaking my attention back and forth between tiny little unimportant tasks. Do everything in a block and then put it aside for the day. There's a form of freedom in that kind of discipline. So we'll wrap it up there because we're over time. I want you guys to take some time to think about what freedom is and how you would apply that new definition in your life. And then watch as things get in the way and try to deal with them. But ultimately, the reason I wanted to do this module because I thought, well, what's actually better than freedom, really? I don't actually know what is. And maybe that's just me personally, but I think ultimately all self-development is coming down to this aspect. We want to feel free, which is just another word for powerful. Well, it's available to us at any time as long as we focus on the one thing that cannot be controlled by anybody else or by a situation. The reaction to the reaction. Alrighty, guys. Thank you, especially to those of you who showed up live. Hope the people listening to the recording got something out of it. And I'll see you guys in a couple of weeks' time for the next one. Cool? Alrighty, guys. Cheers. Catch you later.